Hello, this is Poverty and Inequality, but this is the part 2. So we're going to be looking at government policies to alleviate poverty and influence the distribution of income and wealth. So this is a specification objective. Now, I don't have many pictures in this presentation, but what I'm focusing on this one is going through the analysis and then thinking about an evaluation point, because really I'm thinking about this being an area where you could have an essay question on it. It could be a 25-mark essay question. So the 15-mark essay question that probably went with it would be why is the poverty, why is the inequality, and then you could go through various reasons, and it's just based solely on analysis explaining how poverty or inequality is caused and how it's caused for certain groups of people. But in a 25-mark essay, you need to look at various policies, but you need to know the benefits and the problems of using those individual policies themselves. So first of all, a key method of reducing poverty, a national minimum wage. So remember when we went through with labour markets, and even in a perfectly competitive labour market, you'd have your demand and your supply, and then you'd have a line, a horizontal line, and as long as it's above the equilibrium position, it should push up the minimum wage, or the equilibrium point. So what we're thinking with the national minimum wage is it's very much going to target those lowest paid workers. So that should increase their earning potential and increase their ability to provide for themselves and get those basic human needs. However, it will increase business costs. Now, there's lots of evaluation that you can do even within that. So thinking about the types of businesses that it's going to increase the costs of. So businesses that would employ a lot of people on minimum wage. So I'm thinking supermarkets, I'm thinking cafes, I'm thinking restaurants, I'm thinking of those types of businesses particularly. And then if you've got businesses, manufacturing businesses that employ a lot of people on minimum wage, does that increase the cost of production and then the component costs, and then all those components going into other businesses as well? So even if it's a business that's not employing a lot of people on minimum wages, are they using components that are produced? So you can see that those kind of linkages, how it can affect a lot of different businesses. And with increased business costs, we get this loss of international competitiveness, so you can link it to your balance payments. I know that's macro, but don't be afraid to link in your macro with your micro units. So we've got a reduction possibly in exports, although it does depend upon the price elasticity of demand for those exports, and we might see an increase in unemployment. You've got your effects as well on aggregate demand and aggregate supply, but all depending on how many people are actually near that minimum wage amount. How many people would it actually affect? We could cut the bottom rate of income tax, so that increases net income for those low earners. So we're thinking about earners maybe who are earning less than £20,000 a year. We could consider them as lower rate tax people on lower rates of taxation. So at the moment, the tax-free earnings threshold is around about £10,000. So that's pretty low. You could increase that amount upwards, and that would increase your net income. However, it does mean that the government's earning less income, so it could increase the deficit. It does depend though, because we might find that if we're increasing the net income of those who are poorest in our society, what they're likely to have is a very high marginal propensity to consume. So we might find that we have multiplier effects from that. A lot of this, I'm a bit kind of surprised with AQA's specification, because personally, I would have put this poverty and inequality section into the macro part of the course, so because there are so many links to the macro part. But I understand why they've put it into this part, because it's linking with the labour markets part, but it's just so easy to get onto macro topics here, and don't be afraid to do it, because in the second year of the course it's all about making those synoptic links between the two. Tackling unemployment as well, this increases people's earning potential. However, tackling unemployment, we're mainly going to find that these are supply-side policies, and we know that one of the problems with supply-side policies are they're long-term. They can also be very expensive as well. And the people that are going to be suffering from really serious poverty, the unemployed people that are going to be suffering from serious sustained poverty, we could say, are going to be the people who have been unemployed for a long time. So these are the long-term unemployed for more than 6 months. And we know that the longer you're unemployed, the rustier your skills get. Maybe the more serious some of your health might deteriorate, certainly in terms of mental health. If we're thinking about self-esteem, this is a huge problem now in our country, and we're becoming a lot better at looking at mental health. But certainly if somebody doesn't have a job, that can really affect their self-esteem and their self-worth as well, and that can cause serious problems. It can hinder them from becoming employed again. And so these methods to tackling unemployment, the serious cases of unemployment, are going to be these people that are maybe suffering from structural unemployment, maybe have not had as many years schooling or education as they've needed to. Maybe they've had some problems growing up. So they're really complex problems. They're not just a kind of case of let's pump some money to the economy, let's bring out a new course at A level. It's more complex than that, and it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be time consuming. And what we're not going to see with that is what politicians or managers call quick wins. You're not going to see quick wins because these are going to be difficult problems to solve. If you're truly looking at tackling unemployment amongst the most vulnerable in our society, which I would include as the long-term unemployed and the people who have very few qualifications, formal qualifications, and the people that maybe have never ever had a job before and maybe come from households where they've never had jobs before, those are going to be the most vulnerable in terms of poverty, and they're going to be the hardest cases to deal with as well. Those are not going to be quick wins. And if we think about government failure as well, it's going to be hard for the government. If they're looking at reducing unemployment, they might find it easier to tackle unemployment in other areas that maybe isn't as endemic, isn't as hard to solve. So maybe more of the cyclical causes of unemployment over the past few years because of the recession. Okay, training and education. This is a bit similar to the other one that I've just spoken about. Increasing people's skills, qualifications, increase the chances of getting employed. You can link this to labour markets as well. Increasing people's marginal revenue product, if we're thinking about the productivity there. Again, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be a long-term programme, and maybe some of the most vulnerable, some of the people that really need those training and education programmes are going to be the people that are maybe starting from a very low level. Maybe they haven't stayed in full-time education even to their GCSE level, so they really need intensive training, good quality intensive training and education courses. Those are going to be expensive. They're going to be something that's more of a long-term measure rather than we can put them on a 3-week course and they're going to be fantastic and ready to go into a job. It's going to be more long-term. So you've got to have politicians that are dedicated to those causes. We have this controversial method as well called the Trickle-Down Effect. So this is when you try to just generally grow your economy, knowing that the economy is going to grow, and largely the people that are going to benefit from this growing economy, benefit the most, are going to be the ones at the top, the richer people at the top. But we've got this trickle-down effect where the spending by the rich trickles down to benefit the poor, kind of the multiplier effects, accelerator effects that we get in our economy. However, this is going to be quite long-term. It's a controversial method as well to employ because the rich benefit the most. And if you've got some very vulnerable people in your society, how long are they going to be able to wait? And remember about the longer you're unemployed, the less likely you are to get a job. So if you're saying, oh, well, the poor are going to have to wait like 2 years till the benefits trickle down. 2 years is a long time to be unemployed and living in poverty and health deteriorating and your skills getting rusty. If you did have skills in the first place, you're going to become more and more vulnerable over that time. So it's very, very controversial. We shouldn't have people starving in Western economies, but we can see why using a trickle-down effect in a less economically developed country where they don't have social welfare may be very controversial in terms of some of those people might actually die if they don't get the help that they need. They cannot wait for this trickle-down effect. We could increase benefits. This is just going to increase kind of income. Hopefully you have a very targeted approach to doing that. So not everybody, you know, not kind of like rich people are getting kind of benefits. But this, again, is going to be expensive. It could increase your deficit. We could have a poverty trap as well caused by this. If people find that they actually have better earning potential living on benefits than they do from working, and so that causes a kind of dependency culture, which we don't think of as good. We could have tax credits as well. This is usually reductions in the amount of tax that you pay, possibly for the elderly, those with children on low incomes, and maybe the disabled. There are a few other groups as well. If you want to know in-depth knowledge about this, you can go on the government's website, but you don't need to. You just have to have a general overview. So it increases your income from what it could have been without having the tax credit, but it does reduce the government's income from taxation as well. But this is quite targeted approach, and it's like a reduction in your tax. So it's not like an increase in benefits, it's a reduction on tax. So it actually should reduce any disincentives to work. So it should, I'll phrase that in a different way, it should increase the incentive to work more than maybe just giving benefits would. That's the idea behind that. So similar methods as, again, to reducing inequality. So taxation. Remember, inequality is not just about targeting the poorest in society, it's reducing the gap between the rich and the poor. So we've got direct taxation to help vertical equity, so progressive taxation, where we've got the richer paying a higher percentage of their income and the poorer paying a smaller percentage of your income. However, you've got to think about the type of taxation, because indirect taxation, remember, like taxes on cigarettes and alcohol or whatever, it could be on anything, that actually reduces vertical equity, because this is a taxation determined by the price, and so if you're poorer, you're actually spending a higher percentage of your income on those types of taxes. You could have means tested benefits, as we looked at before, so this can target the poorest and increase their income. However, we can create a poverty trap, and remember the problems of the government deficit as well, and the government have this whole strategy about trying to decrease the deficit so that they can decrease the government debt. Universal benefits. Now this one is a bit of a funny one. Now there is this new scheme that the government are introducing called universal credits. Now this is where they're trying to take all the kind of income benefits and housing benefits and just have it in one central benefit system. Now this is not universally rolled out at the moment. This is just kind of being trialed in certain areas, and they're trying to iron out any glitches that they get with this. But universal benefits are usually to try and target people who have particular issues. So it might be people with children. So there used to be a kind of benefit system called family allowance that has actually been changed now to become more of a means tested benefit. But it was on the understanding that people with children have higher expenses. People with children or people with disabilities also get these universal benefits. Now these aren't always means tested. So even if you're rich, you can access these benefits. And this is really to try and help inequality between different groups, because if you have a child who has a disability, you will face higher costs. You've got to go to hospitals and groups, and you might have to have special transport. So this is trying to recognise that there is inequalities between different groups of people, not just different earners. But some people call it a blanket subsidy. So there was an article a few months ago, Katie Price, who her son has a disability, and she gets some of these universal benefits, and some people were saying, why does she get universal benefits? Because she she's very wealthy, which she is, but she also has to face extra costs, and the universal benefits are meant to go to anybody who has a child with a disability, and that's the idea behind it. It's really a kind of normative kind of debate whether you think that that's right or that's wrong, but that's just what they are, and you can kind of talk about that in your essay. You can have direct provision of goods and services, so this could be healthcare and education, so it kind of provides this equity, this equality of opportunity. Everyone should have the same opportunities. Again, it could be seen as a blanket subsidy. And you can have legislation that reduces discrimination. So again, looking at groups of people that might be discriminated and face this kind of great inequality, people again with disabilities, maybe certain genders, maybe certain ethnicities, maybe certain people with sexual orientations may be discriminated against, so we can have legislation to try and stop businesses doing that. It could possibly increase business costs because they have to go through more processes. Maybe there's more court cases, possibly with that. Okay, so just a quick whiz through there at the end. But